Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today, going all in on the story of the RMS Lusitania. We're going to go way beyond just the tragedy angle today, okay? We're going to explore, like, her whole life, from all those speed records, to some pretty hush-hush wartime secrets. And get this, we've got blueprints, we've got journals from people who were actually on board. We even have a limerick written by the ship's purser.
That's right. This deep dive should give you a whole new look at a story you probably think you already know.
Okay, so let's back up for a second. Picture it. Early 1900s, countries are like straight up battling it out for, who's the best on the open ocean. It was basically the space race, but like on water.
Absolutely. Having the biggest, fastest ocean liner, that wasn't just about luxury, it was a matter of national pride. And when Germany's Kaiser Wilhelm der Grosse swoops in and takes the Blue Band, the award for the fastest land across, well, Britain felt the heat.
So Britain needed a champion, is that what you're saying? Someone to bring home the gold or the blue ribbon, I guess?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that champion, the Lusitania. Designed for speed, obviously, but also with some secret wartime tricks up her sleeve. The British Admiralty had a hand in her design right from the start.
Whoa. So more than meets the eye with this ship, huh?
Oh, way more. But hold on, before we get all cloak and dagger, let's just talk about the sheer size of this thing. I mean, she was longer than the river they built her on. They had to launch her diagonally. Can you imagine? What an engineering feat.
That's unbelievable. I can't even picture that. And how did they get her to break all those speed records? What was the secret sauce?
Okay, here's where things get juicy. The Lusitania was powered by something called the Parsons turbine. It was revolutionary, a total game changer in terms of engines. But, like all good things, there was a catch.
Huh. Fill me in. What was the catch?
Vibrations, lots of them, all those powerful turbines. Well, they created a constant hum, a rattle. Some passengers, especially in the more budget-friendly cabins, they weren't too thrilled about it.
So not exactly a smooth ride for everyone then?
Well, they tried to fix it, but the rattle, it kind of stuck around. You could almost say it was like a little foreshadowing of things to come,
Ooh, ominous. Okay, so rattle and all, the Lusitania sets off on her maiden voyage in 1907. Over 2,000 people on board, fresh paint, the works. Must have been quite the spectacle.
Absolutely. A new era of travel. And talk about luxury. First class. It was like stepping into a palace. Dining rooms fit for royalty, a lounge with stained glass, even those newfangled electric elevators. But here's the kicker. The second-class cabins, almost as good as first class on other ships. Designed by the same architect.
Even if you weren't rolling in dough, you could still travel in style, huh?
You got it. And even third class, they had running water, electric lights in their cabins. Big deal back then.
Wow. So they really went all out to impress everyone, no matter where they were sitting.
They did. And speaking of impressive, you ready for that limerick?
Oh, yeah, the one from the purser. You wouldn't happen to have it on you, would you?
There was a young man in Westphalia who had charge of much costly regalia. To his sweetheart, he said, "My dear, when we're wed, we'll call our first girl Lusitania."
That's amazing. A little poem for the big ship. So we've got this giant, fancy, kind of shaky ship. What happened next? Did she get that blue ribbon back from the Germans?
Second voyage, she did. Crossed the Atlantic in under 5 days, a brand new record. Celebrations everywhere in Britain.
That's huge, not just for the company, but for, like, the whole country.
Total national pride. And of course, the rivalry with Germany, it only heated up. Lusitania and her sister ship, Mauretania, they were constantly going back and forth trying to outdo each other.
They really captured the public's imagination, didn't they, these ships? They were symbols, not just boats.
Absolutely, symbols of technology, of national power. But of course, not everything was smooth sailing. Remember that rogue wave incident you mentioned?
Oh, right, the one where she almost went down. Tell me about that.
Picture this, the middle of the Atlantic, rough seas, and then bam! This monster wave, like 70, 80 feet high, just slams down on the ship.
That's taller than a 6-story building. What happened to the ship? What happened to the people?
Bridge completely flooded. Lifeboats smashed. Crew members tossed around like rag dolls. But get this, she survived. Popped right back up. Battered, but not broken.
That's unbelievable. But, I have to ask, did that change anything? The way they ran the ship, I mean.
I think it showed them that even with all that fancy tech, the ocean, it was still a force to be reckoned with. But the real turning point for the Lusitania and for the world was just around the corner.
You're talking about World War I, right?
That's it. 1914, the world changes. The Atlantic, it's not just about progress and luxury anymore. It's a battleground. And those secret wartime features, they were about to get a whole lot more relevant.
Right, the Admiralty, they had a plan for the Lusitania. She wasn't just a pretty face, was she?
Nope. They imagined her as an armed merchant cruiser taking on enemy ships.
Wait, so under all the fancy stuff, she was designed for combat, like guns blazing.
In a way, yeah.
Yeah.
They had spaces for guns, reinforced bunkers to protect the engines, full
Yeah.
9 yards.
So why wasn't she ever armed then? What happened?
Those big, powerful turbines that made her so fast. They were also, well, gas guzzlers. Arming her would have been a logistical nightmare. She would needed to refuel constantly.
So, like, she was designed for two things, but she couldn't really do either one properly.
Yeah, kind of ironic, right? And as the war went on, a new threat emerged. One that was even more dangerous than any warship.
Submarines.
You got it. The German U-boats were changing the game. They were sinking ships left and right. And at first, the British, they didn't really get at the scale of the threat. But then, September 1914, 3 British warships, gone, sunk in a single morning.
Wow, I bet that was a wake-up call.
Absolutely. It forced them to realize that submarine warfare was something completely new, something they weren't prepared for. And for the Lusitania, well, she was a passenger liner, built for speed and luxury, not for dodging torpedoes. This new threat, it was a whole different ballgame.
So how did she adapt? What did they do to try and stay safe in this crazy new world?
We'll have to find out when we continue our deep dive into the story of the RMS Lusitania.
So last time, we left the Lusitania sailing into a world that had, like, completely changed.
The Atlantic had become a very different place.
Yeah, no more fancy parties, just, like, this constant fear of being attacked.
Exactly. You can imagine that tension on board.
Absolutely. This luxurious ship, this symbol of progress, suddenly in the middle of a war zone.
And keep in mind, it was still early in the war, right? The idea of a submarine attacking a passenger liner, it was almost unimaginable.
Yeah, like nobody had really seen anything like that before.
So there was this sense of disbelief, almost denial among a lot of people. But the captains, they knew the danger was real, and they started taking steps to avoid the U-boats.
So what did they do? Did they just, like, floor it and hope for the best?
Speed was part of it, for sure. The Lusitania was still faster than any submarine, but they also had to be smarter. Captain Dow, he commanded the ship for a while. He was known for his, well, creative tactics.
He was the one who flew the American flag, right? Didn't that cause a whole bunch of controversy?
That's the one. His thinking was, if the Germans thought the Lusitania was American, a neutral ship, they wouldn't attack.
But wouldn't they recognize her? I mean, she was pretty famous.
That's what a lot of historians debate, even today. Was it a desperate move? Did it actually make things worse?
Seems like a pretty big risk to take.
It was. And it brought up a whole bunch of questions about the rules of war at sea. Can you use a neutral flag? What about protecting civilians?
A lot of uncharted territory, huh? Not just for the Lusitania, but for the whole world.
And Captain Dow, he was carrying a lot of weight on his shoulders. The responsibility for all those lives. He was under so much stress that his health actually started to suffer.
Wow. It's a reminder that war affects everyone, even those who aren't fighting on the front lines.
It really does. In the end, Captain Dow had to step down, and a new captain took over, Captain William Turner.
And that's when Germany really upped the ante, right? With unrestricted submarine warfare.
Exactly. February 1915, they declared a war zone around the British Isles, and they said any British ship, passenger liners included, were fair game.
Wow, that's brutal.
It was a major escalation. But even with that warning, a lot of people still believed the Lusitania was unsinkable.
Maybe they thought that Rogue Wave proved it, that she could handle anything.
Perhaps. But the reality was she was sailing into a war zone, and the danger was very real.
And weren't there also rumors that she was carrying more than just passengers?
Yeah, some people suspected she had munitions on board, war supplies. The Germans later used that as an excuse for the attack, saying it made her a military target.
So you've got the Lusitania sailing into a war zone, potentially carrying secret cargo under threat from U-boats. Doesn't sound like the most relaxing cruise.
It was a tense situation, that's for sure. And then, on May 1st, 1915, the Lusitania set sail from New York, her final voyage.
And this is when the German embassy actually issued a warning, right? They told people not to sail on her.
They did. They put it right in the New York newspapers. They said any British ship in that war zone could be attacked.
So they were basically saying, don't get on this ship, you might die.
Pretty much. But hundreds of people still boarded the Lusitania. Some of them probably never even saw the warning.
It's crazy how denial can work, isn't it? Even when the danger is so obvious.
It's also about hope, I think. Maybe they just couldn't believe something bad could happen to a ship like the Lusitania.
So she set sail, knowing the risks, carrying all those passengers and this heavy sense of dread. What was it like on board? What was the mood?
It must have been a strange mix of emotions. Some people were worried, for sure,
Yeah.
but others, they were still excited, looking forward to the journey.
It's hard to imagine being in that situation, surrounded by luxury, but knowing there's this, like, dark cloud hanging over everything.
It speaks to the human spirit, I think, our ability to find joy, even the most difficult circumstances. But there were also some eerie moments, signs, maybe.
You're talking about the newsreel cameramen, right? The ones filming the departure.
Yeah, one of them, he was filming the ship leaving New York, and he joked, "We're going to call this one the Lusitania's last voyage."
Oh, wow. Talk about foreshadowing.
It's one of those things that just sticks with you.
So the Lusitania is steaming towards Liverpool, completely unaware of what's about to happen.
And as she got closer to the Irish coast, Captain Turner started getting more and more warnings about U-boat activity. He knew the danger was real, and it was getting closer.
Did he change course to try to speed up?
He did some things. He ordered the ship to zigzag to make it harder for the U-boats to target her, but he still thought they could outrun any threat. He even slowed down to save fuel because he thought they were almost home free.
Looking back, do you think that was a mistake?
It's a tough question. Some historians say he was too confident, that he underestimated the U-boats. Others say he was just doing what he thought was best, based on the information he had.
It's a reminder that even the best leaders, they can make mistakes, especially in situations like that with so much uncertainty.
And in this case, the stakes were incredibly high. As the Lusitania approached the Irish coast, just hours from safety, a German U-boat, U-20, was waiting.
This is it, the moment everything
The
changes.
stage was set for a tragedy that would shock the world.
So we've reached the climax of the story. The Lusitania is so close to safety, but danger is lurking just beneath the surface. What happens next? I can't wait to hear the rest. So last time we were on the edge of our seats. The Lusitania sailing along, thinking she was in the clear.
And meanwhile, danger was closing in.
So it's May 7th, 1915. The Lusitania is getting close to Ireland, just a few hours from port. You said Captain Turner had gotten those warnings about U-boats, but he still seemed pretty sure of himself.
Yeah, he even slowed the ship down, to save coal. Figured they didn't need to be going full speed anymore. Sadly, that turned out to be a fatal decision.
Wow. It's hard to believe something like that could make such a difference.
It shows you how unpredictable things can be, especially in war.
Okay, so how did it happen? How did the Lusitania and the U-boat, how did they even cross paths?
Well, around 2:10 in the afternoon, U-20, the German submarine, spotted the Lusitania. The captain, Walter Schweiger, he saw this big four-funneled ship and thought it was a troop ship, a much bigger target.
So it was a case of mistaken identity, is that what you're saying?
In a way, yes, but the thing is, with unrestricted submarine warfare, any British ship in that area was a target. It didn't really matter what it was carrying.
So even though the Lusitania wasn't a warship, she was still, like, a prize for the Germans.
Absolutely. She was a symbol of British power. Sinking her would be a huge propaganda victory.
And that's exactly what happened, isn't it? At 2:10, the U-boat fired.
One torpedo. It hit the Lusitania on the starboard side right near the bridge.
What was it like? Was there, a big explosion right away?
Oh, yeah. Much bigger than anyone expected. Huge column of water, debris flying everywhere. The ship started tilting right away, listing to starboard.
I can only imagine the panic on board.
It must have been terrifying. People screaming, lights going out, the whole ship shaking.
And didn't they not have enough lifeboats?
Sadly, no. They had added some after the Titanic, but not enough for everyone.
So it was a desperate scramble to get off the sinking ship with not enough lifeboats and freezing cold water.
A lot of the lifeboats, they couldn't even launch them properly. Some capsized, others got swept away.
What about the captain? What was Captain Turner doing during all of this?
He stayed on the bridge, trying to steer the ship towards shore. He was hoping, maybe, just maybe, they could beach her before she sank completely.
But it didn't work, did it?
No. Less than 20 minutes after the torpedo hit, the Lusitania was gone. Over 1,100 people died, including a lot of Americans.
It's a horrible tragedy.
It really is. And the sinking, it had a huge impact on the world. People were outraged, especially in America, which was still neutral at that point.
It must have pushed them closer to joining the war.
It definitely played a role. The Lusitania became a symbol of, the horrors of war, the indiscriminate killing of civilians.
And the fact that she might have been carrying munitions, that just made things even more complicated.
It did. People questioned whether the attack was justified, whether governments were doing enough to protect their people.
It's a debate that still goes on today, doesn't it?
It does. But one thing's for sure, The sinking of the Lusitania changed the course of World War I, and it changed the way people thought about submarine warfare.
It's a story that's both fascinating and heartbreaking. The Lusitania, this amazing ship, full of hope and promise, brought down by the horrors of war.
It's a reminder of the cost of conflict and the importance of, well, of trying to prevent such tragedies from happening again.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has been really eye-opening. We've learned so much about the Lusitania, her triumphs, her secrets, and her tragic end.
It's a story that's full of twists and turns, and it raises a lot of questions that are still relevant today.
It's made me think about the past in a whole new way and how it connects to the present.
That's what history is all about, isn't it? Learning from the past so we can build a better future.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the story of the RMS Lusitania. We hope you'll join us again next time for another fascinating exploration of history.